that's a tough one. I mean, there are obviously a lot of articles. If you do a standard Google search on cloud computing, legal, you'll find quite a lot of articles about the legal risks of cloud computing. So that's always well worth a first stab. There are also a few organizations such as the Society for Computers and Law in the United Kingdom, which has a very useful website, and there are many lawyers who contribute articles from time to time. Some of them are limited to members only. And if you have a keen interest in computer law, that would be a useful site to go to and maybe sign up. Otherwise, there are also quite a few free articles as well, so those might also serve your needs. Due diligence. To me, that's the main thing, because as lawyers, we tend to often take a narrow perspective because our clients require us to. So they give us, look, I'm going to enter into this terms and conditions with this cloud vendor. Here is the agreement. Review it and let us know what the legal risks are. So my job will then be to just look at that document in isolation. And I can't, because like I've shared with you, if it's a question of legal risk with regard to connectivity, I need to speak to the technical guy and say, have you done your due diligence? Do you know if this person has multiple layers of redundancy built in, telecoms redundancy? And if so, then I can assess that legal risk as being acceptable for clients. So my job will tend to be then, and if you're doing it in-house yourself, you then have to identify these weak points, flag them, and then have a discussion with either the technical or operational people for them to do the necessary back-end due diligence, and then you'll be able to assess the legal risk. That to me is the first key thing in terms of best practices, to do your due diligence on the vendor. The other area in terms of best practices is do not adopt standard service level agreements used in IT services and try and pass them off as cloud computing ready SLAs, because they're not. They have a lot of fundamental issues, such as, I've touched on a few of them with you, the network issues, connectivity issues, are not dealt with sufficiently in your standard IT services SLA. There are just not enough KPIs. So you'll not be able to assess performance effectively using a standard IT services agreement. There are fundamental differences in terms of remote service and support and on-site service and support. These sort of finer points will not be there. And they have to be specifically addressed in the cloud, especially as you mentioned in a hybrid cloud environment. Standard SLAs will not do. I think clearly the issue will be one of all the internal stakeholders not being properly represented. If it's done by an administrative officer in terms of the contract review and assessment of risk, firstly, that person may not be adept from a technical perspective. Let me start with that, and that would clearly be very truly a fatal situation, because I would expect the administrative officer will probably be looking at it primarily from a cost perspective. That would be his motivating factor. And if he chooses cloud computing vendors based on the cheapest available, then I don't think I need to say more in terms of what you're going to end up with. It's your monkeys versus equals peanut scenario. So don't obviously look at price as being the driving force. You have to take a holistic approach when looking at assessing documentation. The only solution I can see is to have an administrative officer who perhaps was an ex-engineer and who has gone for a part-time course in law. That would be ideal. And mind you, I've come across such individuals as well. Very professional contract managers that companies have. And they are better than some lawyers that I've negotiated with, because they're very familiar with the legal terms. They've done many procurement exercises. They know all the ins and outs in terms of limitation of liability, exclusion of liabilities. They've seen all the legal arguments. They know the technical issues that need to be addressed. So they can succinctly summarize, I've got these 5 technical problems, and then send it down to a technical team to come back with answers. I've got these 5 commercial questions need to be addressed. I can do it myself, or I can talk to my commercial team. And I've got these 3 or 4 legal issues which I simply can't address, and I need my external lawyers or my in-house counsel to assist me with those. And then he gets all his ammunition together, comes in, we go for negotiation, and those are really pleasurable negotiations for me, because you're sitting across the table with an administrative officer who really knows his stuff. These are hard to come by, such individuals, but they can be internally trained. So for an organization that's looking at cutting costs to some extent, don't send your standard AO, administrative officer, to negotiate a contract, because if you come across a lawyer like myself or other IT lawyers, we have a field day. And you end up with really nothing and massive legal exposure. But if you are in a position to maybe spend a couple of years investing time and money on individuals who have an acumen from a technical and legal perspective, and is a first-class administrator, then you have a gem on your hands, and lucky you.